Welcome, welcome, welcome to asset-based teaching, changing perceptions to increase student achievement. I've been looking forward to this topic just to not only learn what everything is about, but we always want to increase our student achievement. We want to do it in the right way. So, I've been saying this over and over again. If you've never seen Miss Ilene teach, have you lived? Have you lived? So now we're here on today and we can hear her speak. But right before that, let me go through some announcements. So I am Dr. Desiree Alexander. Hello, everybody. These are all of my contact information. You can follow me and all that good stuff. If you're watching us on the recording, no, you don't get a certificate, but you do get the knowledge. And right underneath the video, you can find the link to the resource for today. Yay! Okay, what do we have coming up? February 13th, February 28th. These are paid events, but ELA Teachers 20 Best Technology Twos is a whole day session of technology. It is virtual, and you can learn more about it at the link at the bottom. Then we have In-Class Flip next weekend, next Saturday. In-Class Flip, design active learning spaces for student-centered learning. Looking forward to that one as well. Then we have IdeaCon. So if you're going to be in the Chicago area, Schaumburg area, I think I'm saying that right. I am going to be there. I'm going to be a thought leader at that conference. So cannot wait. I love it. Really, really awesome conference. Join us and join me at one of our sessions. And then we have teaching past the test, skills and tips for passing the Texas certification test. So this is mainly for Texas educators, but everyone is welcome. Then we have AI for educators. We definitely have been talking about AI in education for a long time. If you go look at my YouTube channel, we've been talking for AI before it was popular. So we're going to continue now that it is popular talking about AI for educators. And then we have the keys to successful classroom management. Dr. Marlin is going to join us again. She usually comes and talks about SPED topics and IEPs and all these awesome things. So she's switching it up with us a little bit, talking about successful classroom management. Then we have finishing the year strong, ideas to boost student engagement. And Rochelle is a friend of EA Webinar. She comes throughout the year to do different topics. So she's coming on back to talk about let's finish this year strong. Then ready, set, record. Getting started with video production projects in elementary school. So I'm really looking forward to this one, really focused on how do we do video production with our elementary school students? Of course, any and everybody's welcome, but I can't wait to get into that one. And we have two more webinars that I just need to make the flyer for. So by the time we come back next weekend, we'll have 2 new webinars that you can register for. We always have our self-paced classes, usually for test prep, SLLA, educational leadership test, Google certifications, level 1 and level 2, just been updated. And we also have support time if you ever want to talk about anything or meet with me. So we always have our self-paced courses going on. And then, of course, if you want to teach a webinar, even if it's your first time presenting, or if you're your 25,000th time presenting, you can come and present a webinar with us. Or if you just want to learn a certain topic, you're like, I really wish we had one on phalanges. I want to learn about the phalange. Okay, let me know, because I may not even know what a phalange is. So let me know, and I'll try to find somebody to talk about phalanges. So there you go. All of these things can be found at edalex.net/events. So again, let's get what we came here for, talking about asset-based learning and how do we increase our student achievement by changing those perceptions. So I cannot wait to get started. So why don't we do that right now?
Thanks, Dr. Desiree. You do a wonderful job to get everybody kind of energized, and especially me since it's 8 p.m. here in Kuwait. I really feel energized. Thanks so much for all that you do in the professional development space. I can't say that enough. I know that all of us here are grateful for that. Well, welcome everybody who's here live, and for those of you who end up watching this on the recording, welcome to you also. As Dr. Desiree already mentioned, I'm going to be talking about asset-based teaching, changing perceptions to increase student achievement. But a disclaimer here, because as you'll see in a bit, I'm a research nerd, and so it's gone a bit bigger than that, but it all comes back to changing perceptions, increasing student achievement, and looking at asset-based teaching in terms of what are students' strengths and how can we be more aware of them. And also, if you're wondering how to improve student engagement, motivation in your class, classroom management, attendance, achievement and outcomes attainment, student well-being, and your own well-being, I think you're in the right place. So let's get going. So a little bit about me. I have 25 plus years in education as a third grade teacher, principal of K-5, and then an intensive English instructor, and also a director of the intensive English and foundation math program at a local university, all in Kuwait. I've lived here since 1984, married my soulmate, and have lived here ever since. I'm an author of 2 books. I'll talk briefly about those at the end. And professional learning consultant, sharing all of my knowledge because I retired from full-time work in 2019, but I'm still very passionate about supporting teachers and administrators, educators around the globe. And so I do that at every opportunity I can, like today. I'm a research nerd. I love reading research for fun. I also love reading research as it pertains to education. And so you'll see some of that in this presentation today. I'm a daughter of a 99-year-old mother who lives in Buffalo, New York, where I grew up. And fingers crossed, she's going to make it to 100 this summer. And a wife, as I said, mom to 3 children who are them and their spouses. I'm just so proud of all of them. And I'm an Anna to the 3 grandchildren that you see in the photo. Lulua is in the middle. She's here in Kuwait with my son and daughter-in-law. And the twins, Nova on the left and Luna on the right, a little girl and a little boy, are in Boston, Massachusetts, where my daughter and son-in-law live. And I'll talk just briefly about them, something related to them later, but they're the love of my life. 3 of them were born about 5 weeks apart. And so it was from 0 to 3 Nana in the space of 5 weeks. Okay, so what are we talking about today? That's why you really came here. We're going to talk about asset-based approach. What is that? And then we're going to look at some insights from neuroscience. And we're going to make connections between the asset-based approach and neuroscience. The autonomic nervous system, which is the ants, and polyvagal theory. I'll talk a little bit about that if you've never heard about that. Co-regulation and self-regulation, and the importance of perceptions in words, which definitely relates to asset-based approaches. And then lots of tools, which you will find additional information about those tools and different ideas and about the research in the Wakelet collection resource that Dr. Desiree shared the link to, but I also have the QR code at the end on one of the slides. So in case you didn't pick up the link, you can get it on the slide. So I'd like to just start about something I'm very passionate about, the neuroscience of learning as it relates to belonging and safety needs. And so as we know about Abraham Maslow and his research, belonging and safety are basic human needs. And when we talk about belonging, we're talking about connection and relationships and that feeling of trust and validation, all related to that idea of perception and asset-based classrooms, asset-based teaching and learning. So Dr. Kellyanne Allen has done a lot of research out of Australia. I think she's at Monash University. And her quote is, "Students who feel they belong are more likely to have successful school experiences. Students' motivation and effort towards schoolwork are influenced by their sense of school belonging. So I know we talk a lot about SEL, social emotional learning. We might talk about belonging. We might talk about having, a feeling of safety and so forth. But I can't emphasize enough, and you'll see it a little bit more in the neuroscience, about why the neuroscience and the connection to the brain and actually all of our organs is really, really important in order for our students to have their learning pathways be open to that learning. So it's not even, Maslow before Bloom. It's Maslow and Bloom together along with the neuroscience. And I'm not going to get really technical. The things I'm going to share with you are very straightforward. If you want to look into the research a little bit more, you're welcome to with the resources I gave you and also online. So what is an asset-based approach to teaching and learning? An asset-based approach focuses on strengths. I like to call them superpowers. It views diversity in thought, culture, and traits as positive assets. So students bringing in multilingualism, they're bilingual or multilingual. They share different cultures. They're newcomers. I know you're all based in the United States, so I want to be sure that I'm sensitive to the kinds of students that you have in your classrooms. And that's what I based this presentation on also. And traits as positive assets. So we want to have and encourage our students to have different opinions and know that they come from different cultural backgrounds and so forth, and then validate that for them. Teachers and students alike are valued for what they bring to the classroom rather than being characterized by what they may need to work on or lack. And of course, we are going to pay attention to the things they need to work on or lack. But our focus is on emphasizing the things that they can do in order to help them with the things they aren't able to do yet. So why asset-based teaching and learning? It fosters motivation and interest. It encourages the students and establishes a secure classroom environment, meaning they feel that sense of safety and belonging because they know that you're valuing what they bring to the classroom, even though they're still lacking in skills or lacking in knowledge or are neurodiverse. Encourages student development. So from point A to point B, it encourages them to move from point A to point B so that they can get to C, D, and E. Improves student behavior because the more students feel valued, that their opinions, that who they are and where they're from is valued and validated, they are more likely to pay attention in class and be more involved and motivated and engaged. It nurtures the holistic development of the student, and it emphasizes strengths rather than weaknesses, promoting positive growth. Again, we need to look at the weaknesses or the areas of improvement, but we also need to first emphasize the things that they have going for them. So connecting that to the neuroscience of learning. So when we're talking about a positive atmosphere where we're recognizing students' strengths, and one thing I want to point out here, don't expect that students realize what their strengths are because they spend so much time hearing what they cannot do that their self-talk is often very negative as a result. So even if you mention something, unless it's pointed out to them that this is a particular strength that you have found in them, they might not recognize it as a strength. And I have had pre-college students not realize that they have strengths in certain areas because they've heard for so long that they can't learn English and they're very bad in grammar or reading or writing or whatever. That's the narrative that they have in their heads. So let's talk about learning pathways, because this is really important in terms of when we look at asset-based teaching, but also when we look at teaching and learning. And one of the gaps that I think we have is we know that we have the curriculum, we know we have the content, we know we have social emotional learning, but how do they connect? How do they connect? And they connect through the neuroscience, not just the brain. This involves the whole body, our bodies and their bodies, okay? And how we react to each other. So reinforcement of learning pathways are affected by sleep, lack of, not having enough, stress, feeling overwhelmed or just feeling stressed, whether it's something that happened at home or something happening in school, a poor diet or not eating regularly, a lack of skills or not understanding what our skills are, the mindset that we come with, fixed versus growth mindset, movement, meaning maybe I've been sitting at my desk for an hour, hour and a half or whatever, I need to move around, and the physical environment in the classroom. Now, I understand that there's only certain things we can do with the physical environment. Maybe the classroom is a little too small, or maybe you can't move your desks around or so forth. But to make this physical environment in the classroom as welcoming as possible, that's what I'm talking about, within the parameters of what you're dealing with. And learning pathways can negatively or positively impact information processing and learning, meaning that depending on what we're presenting to students and how we're presenting it to them, not just the content, but also our affect, it can really impact whether they're learning or whether they're just either stagnating or just shut down at some times. So knowing how the brain functions can help us teach better. That's the thing I wanted to emphasize here. I talked about growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. And Carol Dweck has talked about, and many others have talked about growth mindset. But one of the research studies I read recently talked about what growth mindset is altogether. It's not just the self-efficacy. So I'm going to break each of these things down, because you might look at them and say self-efficacy, perceived competence, ability, beliefs, and expectancy for success. Aren't they all the same? But there are slight differences, okay? So self-efficacy is our ability, our knowledge, not our ability, but our knowledge inside our heads that we believe that we can learn. Okay, so when I had students coming into my office, when I was director of the Foundation English program, and they would come in and say, I'm never going to, I'm not learning, you know, I can't understand English. I've been doing English or learning English for years now. I now want to go on to college. Can you just tell the teacher, please pass me, because I'm never going to be really good at English. So this is the idea of self-efficacy. What am I telling myself about what I can do? This self-efficacy has to do with you as a teacher too. What is your self-efficacy, or how confident are you in your ability to teach and to deliver the information to your students and do all the things that we need to do as teachers? Okay, so sometimes we have that self-doubt. Sometimes we have that idea that we can't do it. Perceived competence is, how do I look at my ability to do that? Okay, how do I look at my knowledge being able to grow? Right, so where can I get that information? Maybe I don't have that competence. I don't feel that I'm competent enough to be able to do that task. Okay, and then the ability beliefs. Do I have the ability? Do I have the persistence? Do I have the capability of being able to learn and being able to improve? And then expectancy for success. Do I really think that I can move from point A to point B? Or am I stuck somewhere in between, or I'm still at point A and I don't see any way of getting to point B? Okay, so these are all, they're nuanced, I know. maybe not explaining them exactly scientifically, but there are differences. And so all of this leads to improved student outcomes. So if I have that growth mindset, which is composed of, I believe that I can do it, I have the abilities to do it, I believe the strengths that I have will help me get over the obstacles that for the skills that I don't have yet. And I expect that I will be successful. That student who came into my office, those students who would come into my office and say, I'm never going to learn English or math, had a lack of expectancy for success. So we want to keep that growth mindset in mind too. So I'm going to first talk about polyvagal theory and the autonomic nervous system, which we all have. Okay, so polyvagal theory is based is something that Dr. Stephen Porges talked about since 1994. And the reason why, I mean, we've known about our autonomic nervous system. It's what helps us breathe automatically without thinking about it. It keeps our blood pressure and our heart beating. It helps our digestion. I mean, we don't have to do any of that stuff. Our autonomic nervous system takes care of all of that. However, what Dr. Porges looked into was the fact that that vagus nerve, which is the largest sensory nerve, it starts under, behind your ear and at the bottom of your skull and connects to every major organ. And those organs communicate with each other, okay? And so what he discovered was that there is a social connection between our autonomic nervous system and all of these things, all of our physiological needs, the things that are going on without us even realizing them, okay? So this is the vagus nerve. It's very important. If you haven't ever heard of it, I have some of the research in the Wakelet collection, but please feel interested in this because it's very impactful. So as I said, polyvagal theory helps us understand how our body and brain work together to respond to stressors, okay? Things that are happening outside of us during our everyday life. This is not just the student, this is also the teacher. And if you're sitting there, and I know it's a Saturday morning, and it's a time probably that, you could be doing other things, but you're here because you have that interest in learning more. And so hopefully this session and being part of this Educator Alexander community helps you feel that sense of belonging, but also helps you feel like you can de-stress during this session. And it can even be as serious as trauma. So if you look on the graphic on the right, so this is the autonomic nervous system. If you look starting from the top, the dorsal vagal state is the oldest state, oldest part of the brain. Okay, it goes mammals back thousands of years. Okay, and it kept animals safe. So if you were in the dorsal vagal state, you're frozen. So for instance, my mother felt this numbness after after my father suddenly passed away in 2009. She doesn't remember much of what happened within the year and a half after he died. And it's this sense of dissociation and shutdown and numbness. Okay, we don't really want to be there, but it happens sometimes, and it also happens sometimes with our students. The sympathetic state, or the sympathetic part of our autonomic nervous system, produces that fight or flight, and I'm sure you've heard of fight or flight before. So flight would be panic or anxiety or fear. And fight is rage, anger, irritation, frustration. And these autonomic states keep us safe. We prefer not to be in, in the sympathetic or the freeze dorsal vagal mode. However, if we think of it and reframe it as a way to keep us safe, it's actually keeping us from danger, which is why the system has been set up. Now, what Dr. Porges realized was that the ventral vagal, where we always hope to be, where we aren't there all the time, but we always hope to be there, is what he calls the social engagement state. And the social engagement state relates directly to belonging, to asset-based teaching, and all of that, because it basically brings in that idea of connection and safety, which is a human need. And part of that is related to something I'm going to show you now, that a book that I read to my granddaughter that she loves very much, which is How I Feel. Okay. And we talk about feelings. I mean, if you teach, I don't know if any of you teach pre-K or any of the other lower grades or whatever, elementary, but this is the kind of thing we do about teaching students, younger students, about big feelings. So for example, I show her this picture of a happy child and I make a happy face. And she immediately, without even hearing the word happy, immediately her facial expression changed to happy. Okay. And then I show her this one, mad, and I make a mad face, and she gets this concerned look on her face. Again, immediately, before I even say anything or do anything. Okay. And so we can go on and on with the different kinds, but she's constantly reacting to my facial expressions. This is the social engagement part of the autonomic nervous system. We need that connection. We long for that connection. We have to have that connection. Our facial expressions, how our tone of voice, all of that contributes to how others react to us. So if we as a teacher are not in a ventral vagal state, if we're up here in the sympathetic state, let's say a child does something, a student does something and triggers us, and our immediate reaction is anger or frustration. You know, it's been a long day, it's almost the end of the day, the student starts acting out, and immediately I get irritated. The student and students immediately react. It's called neuroception. Before I say anything, before I do anything, the body reacts to that reaction. Okay. Now, we can't avoid it all the time, but if we're mindful about how we're reacting is affecting the other, whether it's a colleague, whether it's a student, we can be more mindful about that. So that's a little bit more about the autonomic nervous system and social engagement and neuroception, according to Dr. Stephen Porges. Rachel Sellers posted this. She also talks about polyvagal theory, but she did this thoughts edition, which I thought was really interesting. That's the one on the left. So the autonomic ladder with the ventral vagal, where we hope to be, where I feel safe, this is fun, I'm grateful, I'm being productive. Obviously, this is where we want our students to be, and this is where we want to be. Sympathetic, we start feeling overwhelmed. Things are getting to be too much, whether I don't understand the math equation, or I don't understand the math worksheet that's being, that I'm supposed to be doing, or the homework or whatever. I don't know what to do. I don't feel like I'm being productive. And then that dorsal vagal, the shutdown is, I'm so lost. I just feel hopeless. What's the point? Why bother? And so that is the shutdown. We certainly don't want to be there as teachers, but there's a lot going on. So to be mindful and know a little bit more about how the brain works and how it works with the rest of the autonomic nervous system. So what happens? It's not just the brain that's realizing these things. When we get angry, our heartbeat accelerates, increases, right? This is all automatic. If we're calmed down, it comes back to homeostasis. It comes back to where it should be. If we have butterflies in our stomach because we're nervous about something, that reaction is also due to the vagus nerve. If we feel like we're going to faint, that's the vagus nerve. If you sneeze 10, 12 times and you don't have a cold and you don't, and you just ate and you don't have a cold and you don't have allergies, that's the vagus nerve. So it's very important to keep it calm. It also affects our immune system. If we're not feeling right mentally, it affects us in our body. So if we're stressed, that's what happens. So I'm going to be talking a bit more about stresses too. So from polyvagal theory to self-regulation and co-regulation. Dr. Stuart Shanker out of Canada says there's no such thing as a bad kid. So students don't come into our classroom with the intent of being disruptive or a bad student. Normally, I would say a good almost 100% of the time. Maybe there's someone somewhere, a student who really is, but normally it's related to something that's going on in their life. So he says there is no such thing as a bad kid. So what is self-regulation and how is it related to co-regulation? We want our students to be self-regulated. However, if they are agitated, if they are in the sympathetic or the dorsal vagal state, it's very difficult for them to downregulate because they are highly stressed. So co-regulation, they look to us. They look to us. They look to us as their teacher. They look to their peers for to be in sync with them. Remember, we have this need for connection with others. Why do we have this need? This is not, the human need is created from our autonomic nervous system. So when we co-regulate, two individuals are in sync with each other and they allow each individual to up or down regulate depending on where they are. Are they at a low or are they at a high? Are they highly agitated or are they in freeze? And we can help them reach this homeostasis, this ventral vagal level, if we are also able to approach them in a calm, engaged way. And so how can we do that? We can look for cues from their emotion. We can look at their gestures. We can also ask them, if they're not in shutdown, we can also ask them, you know, how are you feeling? What are you feeling? Can you share it with me? Of course, we need to set that up from the beginning of the school year that they feel safe to be able to share that with us. So as I talked about Dr. Stuart Shanker, the Shanker method is 5 steps for enhancing self-regulation, and it basically is for everybody, including us. So reading the signs of stress and reframing the behavior. I'll talk about reframing the behavior in a minute. Recognizing the stressors. I'll talk about what are stressors. Reduce the stress. Take it down or pull it up. Okay, we want to reduce the stress. Reflect, enhance stress awareness. So we want to move students from lack of self-regulation, from that misbehavior, to being able to self-regulate on their own. Often students aren't able to do that. And so by modeling this co-regulation with them, we're able to bring them into homeostasis. They will eventually be able to do it on their own. And then restore energy. Why do we need to restore energy? When we're stressed, all our energy is going to that stress. It's not there for learning. It's not there for coping. So we need to be able to restore that energy in order for them to be able to get back to the opening those learning pathways. So Dr. Shanker talks about 5 domains of self-regulation: biological, emotion, cognitive, social, and pro-social. I'm going to show each one of them to you now so you can see them. Each of these domains has its own unique stressors, but they are all interlocked in a way that stress in any one domain can exacerbate or increase the stress reactivity in another. So they push each other. When one is caught in a stress cycle, stressors have a multiplying effect on each other. This can lead to problems in behavior, mood, attention, and health. So what are the biological stressors? So in the biological domain, things could be that they're hungry, or that someone touched them in a way that they didn't like. And remember, we have neurotypical and neurodiverse students in our classrooms. So that could also affect this. These are physiological stressors. Too much sugar or not enough sugar, poor sleep, loud voices or certain noises, or the way the lights are in the classroom could be things that might stress us out. Okay, going back to balance would be a state of calmness. And remember, when our energy is expended on these types of stressors, we don't have the energy to be able to recover and to be able to learn. In the emotion domain, we have things like intense surprise. So for instance, have you ever felt scared because somebody came up to you and boo? That might send you off into a stressful, into a stress if that's something that you are not capable of handling. Other things are being kicked out of class in front of your peers. Depending on how that's done, I would think that being kicked out of class because you're causing problems, you cause problems every day, you need to leave and you need to go to the principal's office or the counselor's office. Okay, that could cause that stress, depression, and feeling like you're not welcome in the classroom. And sometimes this is internalized. Sometimes this is a feeling that isn't really happening, but because of other things that have happened before in their lives, they have this, somebody said something to them in a certain way, it reminded them, and maybe the person didn't even really mean it, but they felt unwelcome. So that's the emotion domain. The cognitive domain, of course, has to do with our thought processes. Let's say that I am one that isn't really good at making decisions, or I feel overwhelmed when making decisions. When I was growing up, this is something that affected me greatly, is that I always second guessed myself. If you're somebody who thinks that, you plan, you look, let's say I'm going to buy a computer, and I've investigated, I've looked up all the articles, I read consumer reports, and I made my decision. And then I either hear something from somebody else, or I sit down at the computer and I think to myself, oh, maybe that wasn't a good decision. And so I'm second guessing myself. Or maybe I have too many decisions to make, like teachers. We have so many decisions to make during the day. Things come at us all the time. And another one would be students who feel they have too much homework. Maybe they're not able to regulate their time at home, or maybe there are a lot of distractions at home. So that would be in the cognitive domain. Maybe students are uncomfortable with competition or tests. I had a student in 3rd grade who used to just completely shut down whenever we had a quiz or a test. She was a perfectionist. I found out later on, talking to her and taking her to the counselor, and she thought that if she missed one, that would really be the end of her. And so we had to kind of talk her through. It took her a little while. We had to talk her through that. So test anxiety is sometimes a cause for cognitive domain stressors. The last two are social domain. So social media, people who get sort of sucked into the social media and scrolling and the doom scrolling and so forth. Some people have trouble with peer pressure, bullying, public speaking. I actually did another presentation earlier today for the Kuwait TEFL Association. And public speaking, I always, the day or so before, I always start to feel a bit of anxiety and stress about it. Make sure that, you know, presentation is ready and all so forth. And then the pro-social domain would have to do with the fact that I felt something was unfair. I was being treated unfairly, feeling unprepared. I walk into the classroom and I'm not sure that my lessons are ready, or I'm a student and I couldn't finish all of my homework, or there's something due and I didn't finish it. Watching the news these days can be very stressful. And so we have to kind of watch ourselves and manage that. Okay. When we're talking about neurodiverse, so this this graphic is something that I wanted to point out. It really applies to all of our students, but this comes from the Professionals Without Parachutes, and they do work with FASD, fetal alcohol syndrome. And the reason why I discovered this graphic is because my nephew, who's adopted, was diagnosed at age 4. He was adopted at age 1. At age 4, he was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. He's now 25, but he has severe delays in learning, in socialization, and so forth. In any case, the more I was reading about co-regulation, self-regulation, and actually I finished a course about 2 months ago through the Merit Institute, which is run by Dr. Stuart Schenker, about self-regulation and early childhood. And so the more I learned about it during the course, the more I thought, I wonder how much benefit there would be to my nephew for understanding more about self-regulation. So I reached out to my sister-in-law, who does a lot of research also. She was very interested in this. So let's take a look at the graphic for a minute. So in the red, obviously, is either that shutdown or that sympathetic state, where the student isn't listening or understanding. They just won't do the work. They can't sit still. They might appear insensitive, say things that appear to be rude. They might be showing off, trying to distract from, you know, the fact that maybe they don't know something. And so the way we look at this diffability, not disability, is by reframing. And so start to look at the reframing here, which I'll talk about in more detail later, is, for instance, seeking acceptance. So instead of looking at the behavior, the misbehavior, as misbehavior on purpose, looking at it as communication. So what is it trying to tell us? So for instance, lying, what is that trying to tell us? Storytelling to cover up memory problems, perhaps. My nephew is a darling young man, but often when he senses that his parents are upset at him about something, he will lie. He will create a lie, which is obviously a lie because he doesn't really understand that it is obvious, because he wants to cover up his ability, his not being able to do something. Okay. And so again, if we realize that this is communication, looking at it by staying calm, asking questions, and so forth. So I just wanted to show this graphic. And the PowerPoint presentation will be part of the Wakelet collection. So you'll have all these resources. Okay, so it's smartest to co-regulate. Just really quickly, slow down and simplify your language. So when we feel that students are dysregulated, one of the things we can do is slow down and simplify our language. Here in the Middle East, where I am in Kuwait, English is a second language for most of our students. And so when it seems that students are not understanding, one of the best things that we can do is slow down, simplify our language, and not only simplify it, but also expand on what we're saying. So say it in different ways. We can match movements to the child's pace so that we can make sure that we're not going faster than the child needs to be. I understand that at a certain point, we can't slow down completely because that particular child is needing us to slow down, but the rest of the class is going ahead. So we have to sort of weigh that and how we can bring in perhaps others to help us with that child's inability to be able to cope with what is happening in class. Align with the child's emotions. So try to be sensitive to that child's emotion and affect. Reflect the child's emotional intent. So remember that intent isn't necessarily that misbehavior. What is that emotion conveying? What is that anger? What is that misbehavior conveying? Tone of voice modulates for the situation. So our tone of voice takes it down a bit. We want to be able to express ourselves. And sometimes we need to take a breath first, because if we're triggered by a student and we react that way, it's makes getting them into regulated state a lot more difficult. And tone of voice and eyes and ears, this all has to do with the autonomic nervous system. Remember, they are seeing and feeling, and before we can even do anything, they are seeing how we're reacting, and their body is reacting without them even doing anything. Stop and wait so the child can take the lead, and together engage in the child's intentions. So do this as a way to co-regulate. Remember, we're their co-regulation partner. This quote by El Arnos, she posts a lot on Instagram. She's a parenting coach and also somebody who really is student and child-centered. So every day in 100 small ways, our children ask, do you hear me? Do you see me? And do I matter? Their behavior often reflects our response. And this speaks directly to what I'm talking about today, is our children look for us to be able to understand them, and that we're listening to them, and that we're focusing on them. And when they act out, they feel that they're trying to communicate with us, and the only way that they know how, what we need to do is be able to make them comfortable enough, give them that sense of safety and belonging. So instead of acting out, they begin to ask questions, or they raise their hand and say, I'm having a problem with this, or they're given an opportunity to be able to, either work one-on-one with the teacher, or to be able to work in small groups on something that they're still lacking or need improvement in. So I wanted to go through some developmentally appropriate SEL practices. This is all from castle.org. And if you're not familiar, I'm assuming you're all familiar by now with castle.org. But if you're not, their resources are really amazing. There are resources for classrooms, for schools, and district-wide, which are really, really helpful. And if you are using the castle.org resources, power to all of you, because it's really, really important. So all of the things I'm talking about when we're talking about neuroscience have to do with that social emotional learning. So if we're talking about preschool, and you'll see the developmental appropriate SEL strategies. So depending on what grade level you're working on, or you're working in, or maybe you're working with multiple grade levels, depending on your position, these are things to keep in mind. So even our SEL strategies have to be developmentally appropriate. And so this is why I'm showing you the next few slides. Begin peer interaction while managing emotional arousal. Initiate pro-social behaviors and interactions along with friends. Stay connected with adults. So this is from the student's point of view. A preschooler has, in order to be able to interact with them with strategies, they need to be able to cater to these things. They understand basic emotional expressions, like I showed you in that book, situations, and ways to manage them, often with adult assistance, along with efforts to solve interpersonal problems. Okay, so again, we're modeling for them, especially at this age where we're socializing them. They begin to follow social rules like taking turns. So for instance, my less than year and a half year old grandchildren don't really understand taking turns yet. They don't understand sharing. And actually, children in preschool understand taking turns before they understand the idea of sharing, because it's all about them at the beginning, right? They don't necessarily see the other child as somebody who also shares different emotions based on what their reactions are. In primary and elementary, forming dyadic friendships, so friendships between two people, and stable peer reputations. So any strategies that we use should cater to the following developmentally appropriate strategies. Control aggressive impulses. They begin to be able to control anger and aggressiveness, and bullying and so forth. They demonstrate emotional regulation within their peer group, showing emotions in appropriate contexts. So you can see the emotional development here. And resolve more complex social difficulties with a flexible variety of solutions. So they have ways that if you present a variety of solutions to them, they're able to discern which ones they might be able to use. And it's important here that we model this for those students. In middle school, and you can see the development builds here, build upon earlier understanding of others to comprehend complex emotional situations in self and others. So now we really have an understanding of what's happening with our friends, with our schoolmates, with our teacher, perhaps, and the emotional situations might be a little bit more complex. Form a largely based identity, a largely group-based identity with increasing independence from adults. So we start seeing them interacting with their peers more than, and we see that whole idea of, I know what I'm doing, and you don't need to tell me kind of thing. And then become able to resolve conflicts with dyadic and group situations. So not just with another person, but also in larger group situations. So they're able to resolve conflicts there. And in knowing these kinds of things, we can introduce different strategies in order for them to be able to downregulate anger, aggressiveness, bullying, and so forth. And then in high school, achieve more mature relationships with others and emotional independence from parents and other adults while maintaining those relationships. So that they keep those relationships, but now they become to have their own identity and they're able to manage more on their own. They understand unique emotional perspectives at a deeper level. They form an individuated personal identity, first group-based and individuated, acquire an articulated set of values and ethical system to guide their behavior. So they begin to have this conscious effort to know what is right and wrong. Of course, they start that earlier, but they have their own set of values that they believe in and an ethical system that guides that behavior based on those values. So, tools for emotional regulation. Are you activated? What tone of voice are you using? What do you need right now? So now I'm talking about you, all of you who are here watching this webinar. How do you feel? And it could be not as a reaction to something happening in the classroom. It could be that something happened at home, or something happened with a colleague, or something happened, you know, that's unrelated to your students. But are you activated? What is your body language communicating? So I'm telling you all of this just to be mindful of those things. None of us are perfect. Sometimes we're going to react in a way that probably isn't helpful to the other person, whether it's a colleague or your student, or, you know, at home. But what we try to do is be mindful and then call it back, you know, kind of take it back. When we realize that's happening, to be able to down-regulate ourselves and also be able to come back to homeostasis. What do you need right now? Do you need a stretch? Do you need to breathe? Do you need to call someone? I know that there are certain classrooms, certain schools in the United States that are now having buddies. So if I'm having a problem during a class period, or I haven't been able to go, and I need to eat something, I haven't had a chance to eat something, or I need to go to the bathroom, for instance, that I could call a buddy to come and watch my class, or an assistant, a sub, or somebody, or just to be able to ask a colleague to help me, to sort of sit with me for a little while and talk to me after class or between classes. Okay, so just take a brief moment to reflect on how you're feeling right now, and are you activated? Did did something happen this morning or yesterday and your mind is somewhere else? I know you're not using your tone of voice with me right now, but if you are activated, what will your tone of voice be, and so forth. So just a brief moment to reflect and relax, and pause so I can drink some water. I did a lot of talking today. Okay, and I'm mindful of my time, so I want to be watching that. So one of the things I talked about was co-regulating. We could also co-escalate. Okay, it's something that I learned from one of the courses I took recently, and I never thought of co-regulating versus co-escalating. And the co-escalating comes from when we are not in that ventral vagal social engagement state. And as you can see from the picture, we end up escalating the student to a more dysregulated state. This goes for our own children. It could go for our spouses, our friends, our colleagues. So are you co-regulating or are you co-escalating? And this one I want to make sure I have time to talk about. So how are we reframing the challenging behavior? We lean into it, and we listen. As I mentioned already, we look at that misbehavior as communication. What is the child trying to tell us? And why is it happening? And why is it happening now? Is it related to something in class? Is it related to something that they brought in from home? And asking those questions, why and why now? That will give us pause and also help us downregulate if we were triggered. Pinpoint the challenging behavior. What's the behavior? Ask, what do we know about the student that might be leading to the behavior? Maybe it's something, they have a new brother or sister at home. Maybe there is a divorce going on at home. Maybe they're just having trouble adjusting. They're a newcomer and they're having trouble adjusting. How can we restore or reframe this behavior as communication? Okay. Now, I want to run through some of the strategies. I bet many of you do some of these. I mean, you don't do all of them, but you do some of them. Self-evaluations, if your students are old enough, but even the youngest students could do the different smiley faces or smiley sad face, how they're feeling, thumbs up, thumbs down, just kind of like this, just as an immediate kind of self-evaluation, so we know how they're doing during the day. Running records and anecdotal notes. Running records are more active, that you're doing all the time. Anecdotal notes is this incident happened, and so, you know, at the end of the day, I need to write it up and just remember it. Teacher observations and checklists, drawing or role playing, doing all of those things related to feelings. When a bullying situation happens or some conflict happens in the classroom, often if you can reenact it, or have the students sit and draw it, or speak about it, it's helpful. And daily check-ins, seeing how they're doing, and that can be done throughout the day. Building a classroom community, again, talk about belonging. What does it look like? Acceptance without judgment. Again, this relates to the asset-based focus and perception. We want to be accepting without judgment. No matter what that student comes in with during the day, how they behave, that student always knows that we're there for them, okay? So that when we do sometimes react in a way that they're not expecting, they understand that when we say, you know, oops, you know, I'm not having a good day, and so, but, you know, let's talk about it. Psychological safety, feeling safe to be yourself, and trusting that others will not judge you because of that. Having healthy relationships with teachers and peers. Obviously, this is the basis for that asset-based perspective. Inclusion, feeling like they have a seat at the table because you've validated them, you valued them for whatever contributions they're giving in the classroom, even if there are things that are lacking when they do contribute, that you notice those things and you say something about it. And then validation of their strengths or superpowers, and letting them know that they do have those superpowers and strengths. More strategies. Okay, I'm going to go through these as many as possible. Some of them obviously that you're doing already, but I wanted to mention as many as I could for those of you who are not doing them. So creating that welcoming and safe environment promotes engagement and learning. That sense of school belonging, I have a long list here of why school belonging is really important. I don't have time to go over it, but I wanted to be able to make sure to include it in the Wakelet collection. It's based on research, of course. Greeting students warmly at the door using positive language. Often we have teachers who are sitting at their desks. They're either busy in the morning, obviously, or busy during the day. They have grading still to do or lesson planning. They have a lot of administrative work, unfortunately. I understand that. But just for those couple of minutes when students are coming in through the door, it's really important. It makes a lot of difference, the research shows. Acknowledge and celebrate students' efforts. I talked about that. Self-talk and self-perception, I mentioned at the beginning, and this is directly related to the asset-based teaching and learning. We need to create an environment for trustful relationships. We need to value their uniqueness. We talk about cultural responsiveness. We talk about language in a multilingual situation or a bilingual situation. I know that there are schools, even in Kuwait, even in this region, which says our modem of language is English. You're not allowed to speak any other language in school. And unfortunately, this devalues who they are. And so I know we talk about it more these days over the last couple of years, culturally responsive and all of that, but there are still those rules. If your school has those rules, it would be really great if you could push back against them based on the science, based on the research. Okay. Looking at their special skills and their abilities and pointing those out. Get to know them through their stories. And there's a great activity that I'll talk about in a minute, which you can actually have them talk about their name. Model respect, empathy, and compassion. Use calming techniques. I'm sure that you've heard about meditation and deep breathing. Let's just sit in our chairs and feel our toes and then our ankles and knees and so forth, just for a really brief break during the day. And then guided imagery. Let's all close our eyes and we're all at the beach or we're all in the forest. What sounds do we hear and so forth. Again, brief breaks just to kind of make sure that everybody, let's say they come in from recess and lunch and they're all hyper. These are great ways to kind of get them to calm down so that they can learn, because obviously all of this affects and shuts down their learning pathways. Again, encourage social interaction. Students need to be counseled and taught how to work in groups so that each person is contributing, but they love and they really, obviously, because of that pro-social and polyvagal theory, they need to have these sometimes. We can't do it all the time, but they need to have it sometimes. So more strategies. This is from my book, and I'm going to plug my book. This is my second book. It's called Finding Your Pathway to Belonging in Education. I and 17 other wonderful educators from around the world have contributed lessons and activities and so forth to promote belonging and a sense of validation and safety in the classroom. WIN, which is What's in a Name, Noah Daniel, a Canadian teacher, provided that one. It's wonderful. It's a project that takes them through looking at their names, what's the origin of their name. Maybe they wish that they had another name and doing investigation into that name. My Town is something that I contributed. You could do that about just any situation. It could be, so My Town basically takes them through talking about their neighborhood, talking about where they live. It could be My Town where they used to live. Creating a sense of community and belonging. Janique Casely, also a Canadian teacher, contributed. Our Family Quilt by Selwyn Garcia. Reading literature about different types of families, and then talking about families. Again, all of the instructions and lots of extra resources are in the book. And self-belonging for teachers. There are also professional belonging resources there for yourselves, because if your mental health isn't in the right place and your well-being isn't in homeostasis, it's very difficult. And we know how much pressure is on all of you, especially these days. So again, reflecting, how can I spark their interest, create a safe space, catch them when they're falling, ensure their self-talk is positive. So how can I create this asset-based perspective in order to be able to help them speak to themselves in a more positive manner and open those learning pathways? So recommended resources. I have this book that I had bought a couple of years ago from ASCD. It's right here, Behaving to Belonging. As you can see, I have lots of pages tagged here. A great resource. I'm not the author, but the authors did a wonderful job. Finding Your Pathway to Belonging that I just showed you. And here is the QR code for the Wakelet collection. So I will give you a minute to be able to capture that. Dr. Desiree also put that in the chat at the beginning. If you want to put that in again, I don't know if you can do that, that would be great. And thank you so much. I want to make sure that I leave enough time to wind down. If there are any questions, Dr. Desiree, let me know. And also, I know that you have some closing announcements that you want to make before we finish up, Dr. Desiree.
Thank you so much. I love that you went through the theory of everything and then went more practical and more practical and more practical and ended with these are actual things you can do. Like, let's get started. So love that. Thank you so much. The
Great.
resource for the people watching the video, the resource is going to be right underneath the video in the description. And for everyone else, I did put it in the chat.
Perfect.
So thank you so much. Do we have any questions? You can throw them in the chat. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I just want to say, job well done. I really appreciate this because I teach preschool, and sometimes as a teacher, sometimes I get frustrated because you don't know why they act like they do. And sometimes teachers send kids to my room because they can't handle the kids. So as teachers, sometimes we just don't know.
Right. Yes. 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 So I hope this was helpful. And it was sort of, I mean, I went into detail on some things, but it was sort of a taster's menu of different things. And I know it's a lot, which is why I create that collection. I'm always adding to it also. So please feel free to look up these different resources. Dr. Stuart Shanker's Merit Center, I have the website there as a link in the Wakelet collection because I think it's very important. He has a lot of, he does a lot of blogs. The sessions that he, there are, small fees for and things like that. However, there's a lot of free resources on the website also, information about polyvagal theory and some of the other ways to be able to, a lot more strategies also.
Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you again, Dr. Eileen. I appreciate you tremendously. And hopefully we will get to see you again.
I hope so. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you to all of you who are here live and to those of you who watch it later.